morning and a warm welcome to the Simply Divine programme. I'm Maria Colfer and you're tuned to South East Radio. Did you know that the Presentation Convent was the first religious order to be established in Wexford town after the penal laws? Well, the convent was opened on Francis Street on Friday, October 2nd, 1818. And that happens to be the feast day of the Guardian Angels. Well, on the 2nd of October, to the day, the Presentation Sisters will be celebrating 200 years of teaching and being a positive influence on the town and county of Wexford. With me in the studio this morning to tell us more about this, we have Joe Rolston, Scott Gaynor, both teachers, and some of the student body representatives. We have Shauna, Katelyn and Alannah. Good morning to you all and thank you for coming in. Joe, can I begin with you maybe? This is a special time in your school. Tell us a bit about the plans for what's happening.
Yes, Maria, well, this is a culmination of 2 years of planning. We got together a mixture of sisters from the convent and teachers who were interested in getting involved. September 2016, I think it was. And we felt that because it was such a significant milestone for the Presentation community, for the convent and for the school, and indeed for the town and county of Wexford, we felt that anything that we put in place would have to be well thought out, well planned, that we didn't want to rush things at the last minute. So we're delighted to finally reveal our plans to the wider community. So we have 3 days of celebrations planned for the first week of October. So you rightly mentioned the 2nd of October 2018 is the exact 200th anniversary from when the convent was opened on Francis Street. So that's our foundation day, and we felt that that was an appropriate day to start the formal celebrations for the Bicentenary celebrations. So on that day we have our student body in for just a half day, so they're getting a little treat. So all the tutor groups who are named after Irish saints are going to be given a guided tour of the Presentation Convent and the gardens to the rear of the convent.
Sorry, what did you call them? Tutor groups?
Tutor groups,
yeah.
So every base class from first year right up to sixth year, they all have a theme or a saint's name attached to their base class. So they're going to be brought up, they're going to meet the sisters, they're going to be brought out to the convent gardens, which is a source of curiosity for all our students because they never get to see over the wall, but they'll get to see behind the wall now. And very significantly, there will be a prayer service at the convent cemetery where all the deceased members of the community are buried. So that's kind of the student side of things. Then when the students they're going to be allowed home early that day. So that evening then there's going to be an open evening in the secondary school and in the convent for anybody who has connections to the Presentation community, former students, former staff, former sisters. They're going to be invited to come in and have a walk around and recall old memories of the place. That starts at 6:30 that evening, and then that leads in quite nicely at 7:30 to the official book launch of the Bicentenary publication that myself and Scott have been mad at over the last 2 years of planning and execution, but we got there. So there's going to be a lot of dignitaries there that evening. A lot of dignitaries from our trustee body, Kesht, Presentation sisters from around the country, politicians, etc., and most importantly, obviously, former students and staff, as well as samplings of present student and staff as well. So that's going to be launched, and we'll talk about the book and on.
Yes,
and then afterwards there'll be a lantern procession walk, which we thought was appropriate because the lantern is a very important symbol for the Presentation order, and the symbolism of that there's been a constant light of education shining from Francis Street and School Street and Grogan's Road over the last 2 centuries. So once the launch takes place, there'll be a processional walk via School Street to Francis Street through the convent. We're going to visit the original schoolroom that was opened 200 years ago that evening, known as the Sodality Room now, and then the walk will conclude at the prayer service at the convent cemetery again. So that's the Tuesday. So the Tuesday is the busiest day of all the celebrations.
I'm just going back there to the lantern procession. Is everybody going to receive a lantern?
Yeah, I think we've ordered about 100 altogether. So it'll be a mixture of former students, former staff, present students, present staff, and the sisters as well. So it'll be beautiful because we wanted it to be at a certain time in the evening where the light was going down, and you know, if anybody's living on School Street or Francis Street, don't be perturbed if you see hundreds of people walking around with lanterns that evening as part of the celebrations.
And you have school choirs and Bishop Dennis. And
so yes, that Thursday the 4th of October, then we're having our celebratory Bicentenary Mass with Bishop Brennan and our school chaplain, Father Tom Dalton. That's in Rose Street Church at 11. That's for all the present members of the community, so our students, our staff and the sisters in the convent. And then on the Friday, to kind of formally conclude the celebrations that week, we have a gala concert in Rose Street again at 7:30. Members of the public are welcome to attend that, and that's former members of the choir and present members of the choir under the tutelage of Miss Laura Mann and Miss Amy Redmond, our current music teachers in the school. So that will be about an hour and a half of mixture of religious and secular music, and I think it's a kind of fitting way, because Scott and I know how important music has been in the Presentation Convent over many, many years, so we've kind of felt it was appropriate that would be a nice bookend to kind of formally conclude the celebrations. So November 21st, if I can just add that in, there is kind of one presentation day is November 21st for our community, so it's a very significant day for us too. On that day, a sculpture is going to be unveiled in the grounds of the school that's going to symbolise the 200 years of education, symbolising Nan O'Neill, our founder, the two founding sisters, Catherine Devereux and Jane Teresa Frayne. So that's another part of the celebrations, but it won't be as an informal occasion as these few days are in October for us.
So that's a wonderful celebration list of things and items and events. Girls, I'd like to come to you. Before these preparations began, Shauna, for example, for the Bicentenary, did you have any idea that there was such a rich heritage to your school?
I'll be quite honest, I've only really noticed it in the past year or two. We've learned a little bit more about the history of Nan O'Neill, and especially we've seen a lot of the hard work that has gone in for the Bicentenary. So in my junior cert years, I wouldn't have really taken into consideration, being quite honest, but now I can really see like the heritage. It's really nice, and it gives us a good sense of pride, I suppose, to see where it all came from.
And Katelyn, is there anything that makes your school stand out, or are all secondary schools more or less the same?
I suppose they are in some ways, but then in other ways I think our school kind of stands out as more of a community. You'd feel more part of something when you go to school. Like other days you'd be like, oh, I don't want to go, but then when you get there, people will say morning to you, or they'll say like hello, and it just makes you feel more welcome and then to enjoy school and go to class.
What do you like most about being a Pres girl, Alannah?
I suppose the sense of community in the school as well. Like everyone knows everyone nearly, and there's so much extracurricular activities and like you can get involved in as well, and you make new friends from older years and younger years, and you know, you go out and you represent your school in many different things and you feel proud to do that.
Well, you're a head girl team. What does that mean?
I think essentially it just means kind of we're kind of like a role model, I suppose, to the younger years, just to show a good example and just to kind of lead in a way as well.
Yeah, and just kind of represent the whole of student body. Like if there's any problems, they can come to us. If like they
How
need
does
help.
that work?
So like if someone had a problem, they like didn't want to go to a teacher about it, like they know that we're there if they need anything, because like we were all voted in by both students and teachers. So
we'd get to represent the school like at different kind of events and stuff as well, just instead of bringing the whole school body, if they just wanted to bring like a select few, do you know.
Does that mean to management meetings and things? Do you get
well,
to
just
do
to kind of like events and things, I suppose, that the
Yeah.
school will be involved with, just like the KESH conference and things like that.
Yeah, you said you were elected, did you?
yeah.
Yeah, and the other students elect you, is it?
Well, first the teachers had put forward names like that they would think, and then it went as a democracy, as in the students voted.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued that there are three of you and not just one. Usually we hear of a head girl, but it's a nice shared Trinitarian model. Do you have a whole lot of responsibilities now because you're the head girls?
Well, we have a prefect team for sixth year, and the prefect's job is basically they take on a different subject between two or three girls each, and we kind of monitor that as well and kind of...
And to try to like improve those subjects as well, so through sport or through music or stuff like that, and try to influence the younger students as well to get involved.
Okay. Well, what does these 3 days of celebrations now mean to you?
I think it's a great chance to, like, we're all very proud because it's a great chance to kind of, in a way, show off our school to the public, because we do, like, our school is great and we do a lot, so it's nice to kind of put it out there and show
Showcase
everybody.
it, yeah. Do you want to add anything?
And I suppose with the book as well, that we get to read about past students who have gone
Yeah.
on and done well in their lives as well, to inspire us to go on and do well in ours.
Well done, well done. Now, Scott, you've been patiently waiting there, and you're into the literary side of things. And what better way to capture and tell the story of 200 years other than writing a book? How did it all begin in Francis Street?
Well, it all began in Francis Street. There was two sisters already in the presentation order from Kilkenny. As Joe has mentioned, Sister Katelyn Devericks and Sister Frayne as well. So they come to Wexford and Francis Street, as I said, in 1818. And again, I know Joe's part of the book covers that in great detail. I suppose the hardship that they had, but also the help that they got. And you know, the school and the convent over the years has collected many friends, and especially so in those early days. People like, you know, the Devericks family, the Carrolls, huge benefactors, and, you know, I suppose they can never repay them enough and thank them enough for the help that they did. But over the years, and as Joe traces, the progression of the school, moving again to School Street and Grogan's Road. Well, and I think what really gives it, I suppose, as well as the literary side, the visuals in it can really give it a good representation, even the maps in particular, looking at how the steps of the old chapel. We forget that before the twin churches in Wexford, the chapel at the Presentation Convent was the chapel for the town. So
And it's a gorgeous little chapel.
it is a gorgeous chapel. And again, look, we spoke about the head girl team, and we're very lucky as a staff now to have three girls to represent us so well as they do. But again, I don't know if they've been into the chapel. Students don't get to see it. I only got to see it myself when we started this. Sister Grace opened it up, and it really is beautiful. So I'm looking forward to, I suppose, opening it up for everyone else.
And was it difficult to get material to do the research?
It was. It was.
I thought nuns were great at keeping records.
They were, and you know, we've obviously trawled through a variety of different materials. So the annals in the convent were fantastic. So from the origins, the register of the nuns, and going through the convent, all of those entries are there in such ornate detail, really, really beautiful. And again, I think they'll be on display in the convent as well.
Was there anything that amazed you or surprised you as you did the research?
Yeah, lots of different things. I mean, look, I was blown away, to be honest, by the work of the sisters, particularly in those early years with the annals. I know that registrar, it is, like, I mean, you look at documents like the Book of Kells and things like it's on a par with things like that. It really is beautiful. So I'm looking forward to people seeing that. We owe a huge word of credit to a gentleman, Dermot McCarthy, who's done so much work for us, researching the newspaper archives in Wexford Library, going all the way back, not just the Wexford People and so on, but all of the different newspapers. So we wouldn't have been able to get such a rich history down on paper without his help. You know, the census records, I know Joe did an awful lot of work on that as well. So it's really, I suppose, trying to get as much information as we can to piece together, I suppose, a publication that does justice to the work that was done. And look, I mean, we've been working on this for 2 years. We could have been working on this for the next 20 and still not covered everything, such is the nature of such a publication. But hopefully it does some justice.
One of the things that stood out for me, particularly when I was tracing the development of those early sisters that joined the convent, I'm talking about the first few decades of the 1800s, and the early sections of the book trace what they did in the convent and what they did for the townspeople, was that, you know, we called the book Going One Step Beyond. It's a phrase that's associated very strongly with Nan O'Nagle, and I could definitely feel the sense that they literally, some of them in some instances, actually gave their life over to the sacrifice and for the betterment of the young people in the town. We talk about Sister Devericks, we talk about Sister Frayne, Sister Butler, who took over as Mother Superior afterwards. All the entries record that they gave their life because they picked up illnesses while they were working in the convent school, because conditions were frankly deplorable. You know, Sister Frayne in particular, who was Mother Superior for 28 years, from about 1824 to her death until I think 1852, you know, they were working with about 180 students in one room with two teachers. You know, we complain that we have 30 students in one classroom, but, you know, this was far above the pupil-teacher ratio back then, you know, and that's one of the things that was very important to Scott and myself, that we were able to give those early sisters in particular, particularly those going back in the 1800s, that we're giving them a voice again, and we're not allowing them to be forgotten, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have the school that we have nowadays, and that was very important to us.
think what's important, sorry there as well, I think what's important as well is even Sister Deverix, as Joe mentioned, it's not just the story of Wexford. I mean, we look at the presentation community in Enniscorthy as well. So shortly after her work in Wexford, she moves to Enniscorthy, and the tradition and that convent started there too. So within Wexford County, as well as nationally, but particularly for us obviously in Wexford, there's a rich tradition of, I suppose, service by the presentation community. And I know when the convent closed in Enniscorthy, and Sister Melda Wickham, who will be speaking on the night as well, she wrote a lovely article for the Irish Independent, and it really was the perception from, I suppose, the people of Enniscorthy there was a real sense of thanks and gratitude, and they're really held in high esteem, and rightly so. And as Joe says, it's nice to give those a voice.
We didn't
rightly so,
we didn't just want it to be solely like historical facts and so on. That's very important to have that. But we wanted to give the book a personal touch. So about a year ago, Scott and I put out a call on our school Facebook page to see if there was anybody who was interested in submitting any articles about their time in the school. So we're very, very fortunate. We called it the Perspective Series. So it's about 20 to 25 past students, and we're talking now going back to the 1930s, when the presentation was a primary school for mixed, for boys and for girls.
Oh, was it?
So we're in a very fortunate situation that those stories aren't being lost, that we have traced the evolvement of the Confidence School. Like literally we have somebody from every decade from the 1930s up to the 2010s who are giving their perspective of their own experience in the time of school, and that was hugely important to us. Because I think for the current students, when I tell them that it used to be a primary school for boys and girls a lot longer than it was a secondary school for girls as it is now, they kind of get a bit of a shock. But the school has evolved over the course of 2 centuries from being predominantly a primary school for girls. Then Richard Deverix in the 1870s proposed that the presentation open up a primary school for boys. He funded that himself, the building of that primary school. And then as time evolved, it became a kindergarten school, a secondary tops, and then in 1971 was the big year when the Department of Education granted the presentation secondary school status. And I suppose the rest of the current history is history in that sense.
Yeah, and even Joe mentions again that I suppose the surprise from our students' point of view, Mr. Ryan, the principal of the school, he gets up at the start of year assemblies and he says, well, I remember when I was a presentation student, and the girls are a little bit aghast, and so how does that work? But he was a presentation pupil in Enniscorthy, and it was interesting, I suppose, to compare the development of both schools. So as Joe rightly says, in 71, when the presentation Wexford is granted secondary school status, Enniscorthy loses it and they go to primary school. So I suppose how they intertwine was quite interesting to compare those as well.
Can I ask you, from your research and your own experience at the present time, do you think students have changed much over the years?
Look, I mean, the uniform has changed, the colour of the tie has changed, but one thing that's stood out is certainly from the periods that I looked into, is there is this, and the girls mentioned it just there is this sense of community. So yes, look, I mean, generations change and there's different trends, but what comes across throughout all the decades from, I know Sister Therese McCormack is mentioned, we speak about the drama festivals, all of the Pres in Print, the Pres Prattle, all of the different initiatives, being on RT television with the choir in 1963. There's an holistic education offered a presentation, and the girls get involved. They don't just, it's not teaching to a test, it's not just about getting to exams. Yes, they're important, but we're looking to shape people here, and we're looking to prepare them for life. And I think the girls throughout the generations, and certainly today as well, they enjoy it, they embrace it, and they get involved, and it makes a lovely place to work, and I hope for the girls it makes a nice place to go to school as well.
That's one thing that stood out for me in terms of the kind of students that we always had in the presentation going back centuries, is that presentation students have always made their mark, not just in Wexford but globally as well. There's one particular former student that we found out fairly late in the process, I think, Scott, wasn't it, that Dermot McCarthy actually alerted us to her. Her name was Mary Fitzgerald, and her niece in it, and she was from townland of Gertine out towards Merntown direction, I think it was, and she was a presentation student in the late 1890s, and she qualified as a shorthand typiste, is what she qualified officially as, because the presentation offered a lot of different things back in the 1890s in particular. And Mary Sinnott emigrated with her family to South Africa, and she basically was the co-founder of the Labour Party in South Africa. She was a suffragist long before that term was bandied around. We found some fascinating material about her getting up, standing up in the public with her pick handle in hand. She was nicknamed Pick Handle Mary because the men were so intimidated by her oration skills. And she was a defender of children's rights, workers' rights. She sacrificed herself, put herself out there in the world of masculinity. She was tried to be taken down countless occasions by jealous men who were wanting to take her down a little notch. She was the first woman who was publicly elected to public office in South Africa when she was elected to the Johannesburg Town Council back in the early 1900s. And we're very proud of that. She's just one example of many presentation students that have, if I use the quote again, gone one step beyond whatever they've chosen to do. And that's one thing that I love about the Perspective series. You get to see firsthand what our students have gone on to do after they left the presentation. But that marker is always there.
Well, Joe, how would you describe the presentation ethos, or how would you sum it up?
It goes back to Nan O'Neill, our founder. I mean, the first few words of our mission statement is that we're inspired by the vision of Nan O'Neill. And, you know, I'm close to working in the school now for 11 years. I came down from Sligo. I didn't really know much about the presentation community, to be perfectly honest with you. We had no kind of presentation schools up my neck of the woods, up in that part of Sligo. We have many other different things in Sligo, but not the presentation. But one of the things that I distinctly remember on my first day was that the then principal, Geraldine Crowe, informed to me that, you know, we're guided by the vision of Nan O'Neill, and Nan never left anyone behind. And that always stayed with me over the last decade or so, that we never leave any student behind. In the classroom, extracurricular, we always go one step beyond to make sure that everybody's included. You know, and we see it today in the fabric of our school, the wonderful learning support and resource team that we have there for students who have special education needs. You know, we attract great students from all over the town and the county as well. And that's very important, to have a sense of who we are, and to be aware on an occasion like this in our bicentenary, to be aware of where we've come from as well. Because if you don't know your past, you don't know where you're going in the future. And that was very important. That's one of the things that Scott and I are very excited about, bringing this publication out to a wider audience.
Yeah, and it is, as Joe says, look, it is inspired by the vision of Nan O'Neill, and, you know, it's the pursuit of excellence in a caring and respectful environment, and creating this sense of community. And we keep going back to that word again. And, you know, recently there was a focus group on designing this new mission statement, and like most things, it's the process rather than the product. So yeah, we're excited.
At this point, I want to thank you, thank the head girls for coming in, Shauna, Katelyn and Alannah. And before we finish, at this point, I want to bring in Father Billy Swan with this week's update. But do stay tuned, because we have another surprise in store for you.
So good morning, everyone. Father Billy Swan is my name, and I'm here to tell you this morning about the content this week on the Hook of Faith website, the new website in our diocese dedicated to evangelization and to digitally proclaim the gospel in the Diocese of Ferns and beyond. This week features a homily for the 25th Sunday of Ordinary Time, in which Jesus talks about his own death, but also in conjunction with the first reading, it reminds us as Christians that we have been anointed with the same courage that Jesus had himself, that to be a Christian is a person who isn't afraid, who has been given the gift of courage by the Holy Spirit. We also have an article on the building blocks of life by Mr. Sean O'Leary. Also included is a feature on St. Matthew, the Apostle and Evangelist, whose feast day occurs earlier on this week on the 21st of September. And it draws attention to our fact that the Episcopal motto of Pope Francis is taken from a commentary by St. Bede on the scene of the calling of Matthew. That when Bede is commenting on this, he said, "In mercying Matthew, he called him." So it's always been inspiration for Pope Francis, that theme of mercy, that God is merciful to us and at the same time calls us. We also have a video promoting the Rosary Around the Coast event that takes place on the 7th of October, and an interview with Bishop Dennis Brennan. He's first for the Hook of Faith, as he shares his thoughts on the recent World Meeting of Families and a historical visit to Ireland by Pope Francis. So check all of that out on the Hook of Faith at www.thehookoffaith.com. Talk to you next week.
Thank you to Father Billy there. Well, we're almost out of time. My thanks to Father Dermot on the sound desk. And I told you we have a surprise for you, because taking us out, we have one of the presentation's best musical talents. She's Rachel Grace, and she will sing Liam Lawton's song. It's about the presentation foundress, the Venerable Nano Nagel. And we mentioned it earlier about the lantern procession, and this is called Who Will Light the Lantern?
There was a time, such a time when hearts were hurting, longing to find some peace of mind, find an open door. I knew a time, such a time when hearts kept searching, trying to see through darkness to free a heart without its soul. Who will light the lantern and keep it burning bright? Who will search the darkness where shadows seek the light? Who will find the courage to sing a different song? Who will light the lantern and go on step beyond?
This program was produced by the Christian Media Trust exclusively for Southeast Radio.